going to be going safely in the favor of Alan, at least in terms of the predicted outcome.
Definitely feels like it. Rush Warrior traditionally has that good matchup because of conditioning mainly. I find getting the minions out of a range where Rogue can clear them with the prize plunderers. But we can take a look at the opening hands, and the Rogue that che0nsu has brought already has double Octobot in the opener. One of those is going to be kept for sure. Two of them, I often question if you don't have guaranteed ways to really get the payoff. But with that Kazakus, all of my doubts have been erased.
Yeah, it's a very interesting conundrum with Rogue, isn't it? Because reducing Octobot is one of the least impactful cards you can reduce, weirdly enough, because the actual body of Octobot is not that impactful. But this hand already is just looking so premium. It's very possibly like turn 4 Jandis even, instead of like turn 5 Golem. Like, there is some disgusting stuff that can be pulled off on this in this game.
Indeed. I don't think you can do both Kazakus and Jandis turboed out, though, if you go for that, because he does still need to take another turn to play the other Octobot, which is the main cause for che0nsu's hesitation here. There's a lot of different lines he could take, though. If he bumps first, he can get down the Octobot and the Foxy Fraud just for maximum tempo. And he can also immediately proc the second Octobot with the Guardian Og Merchant if he wants.
True.
That would get the Jandis down to 4, and that means Kazakus is playable for 2 next turn. It's just so many different lines he could take. che0nsu is going for a bit more of a patient one, though, just Og Merchant to clear off the Parade Leader, because he still has to respect Alan's potential to get that attack buff value.
Yeah, it's a little interesting because in terms of actually killing off an Octobot, even when you factor in the buff from the Parade Leader, it's pretty much only Rakara that actually allows you to cleanly kill the Octobot on that turn. But che0nsu deeming that risk scary enough and just goes with the slightly more secure line of just guaranteeing yourself the Kazakus for the following turn. The downside of this line, though, if you did want to take the risk that they don't have Rakara, is you do have Jandis and the Golem both vying for that 5-cost slot, whereas turn 4 is looking like it might be a little bit weaker, but Foxy Swindle, I think, will more than take care of that.
Yeah, it is a little bit awkward in terms of the curve, but he is very likely to pick up a way to spend his mana in turn 4, and more importantly, find a way to get rid of this Parade Leader. He's looking for Brain Freeze, looking for Prize Plunderer, and with the Og Merchant, there's potential to just clear it off with trades the way he did last turn, or just proc the second Octobot immediately.
Yeah.
Gonna see what's off the draw. Okay. Whoa. So premium, this entire hand.
This is really interesting because you don't actually have to proc the Octobot immediately. The chances of it dying straight up again when you've dealt with the second Parade Leader are very low. There's no Tent Trashers in the list, so it can't just be cleanly killed off that way. It would kind of have to come off Athletic Studies into Tent Trasher or the Warsong Outrider. So I don't hate the idea of just playing out Octobot, but I guess if you are going to use up the Brain Freeze here, you may as well just use it and get the Og Merchant down.
Yeah, I mean, there is a world where Alan just doesn't play something into the Octobot. I mean, you're probably winning in that case, so che0nsu is going to hold on to the Og Merchant. It's also his last cheap battle cry to go with the field contact, so I think this is very smart overall. He can still get down Jandis on curve or the Golem next turn if that's necessary, and Alan is taking a turn of response, trying to deny the Frenzy value, which is, you know, a big deal, but che0nsu has enough resources that it is going to be fine.
Yeah, just finding any way to deal with the Octobot there, I absolutely agree with Alan, was a higher priority than going for just Ringmaster Watley. Some pretty premium minions here. Again, you kind of forget that Lilypad Lurker, after the buff, is just a premium statted 5-drop, and means that, again, che0nsu is just keeping up with his dominance here. Alan has a long way to go to pull this one back.
As if we needed even more good 5-drops in the pool. You're absolutely right. The Neophytes in the early game, we posited that they could be effective against Rogue, but not quite against this pan out, which has been super minion heavy from che0nsu, not really needing Brain Freeze to be super cheap the turn that he played it. And now Alan's going to go fishing with Stage Dive. You'd have to imagine it's already looking like a Samuro draw for a clear out that looks a bit better than this, because he still doesn't have a perfect read on which of these is the illusion either.
Right, which is kind of why I'm wondering if you go Ringmaster Watley first, because that does guarantee you the other bumper card from your list, which is at least one less rush minion in your deck, so you're that much more likely to get Samuro off of the stage dive, because I fully agree, it's kind of approaching that point where it's Samuro or bust.
Cool. And because he started with a 1 cost, you'd have to think that Alan was trying to maybe fit in the Watley that turn. He took the 50-50 guess. che0nsu with the Mind Games put the lower health minion as the non-illusion there. And so Alan takes the entire turn to remove with the second bumper card draw, though, off of the stage dive. That's really premium to make sure he doesn't take too much damage. It does mean that the Watley is only drawing 2 cards now, though.
Yeah, it was kind of weird finding the bumper card there. As you said, it was good immediately, but it means he didn't get Samuro, which could be the game-winning card. And, of course, Waters is a little bit weaker now in response. che0nsu in that awkward spot that you often end up in as Rogue, where you can go for the field contact turn, but there's nothing to target. So Prize Plunderer, Brain Freeze, kind of Orc Merchant to an extent as well. They suffer from not having any good targets.
Yeah, I don't think he was intending on playing Prize Plunderer at all, because if he wanted to get that draw, I'd imagine it would be the second card and you just proc the Octobot, or like put damage on the Octobot.
Sure.
che0nsu is going to take the draw with the che0nsu instead here, and it's mainly to keep the Octobot train, sorry, the field contact train rolling, but he's weak to Samuro either way, I think, and he maybe had the read that it wasn't their last turn because Alan used so many other different resources, so he's saying the 3-1 Divine Shield field contact is annoying enough.
Crab Rider doing more than enough here, though, even with its recent nerf, in this instance, back to its former glory, to take out the field contact in 1 fell swoop, or 2 fell swoops, I suppose, and means that che0nsu, while he is again ahead on the board, it's getting to that scary point where turn 8, turn 9 is rocking around. The power plays are going to start coming through from Alan. And che0nsu hasn't dealt that much damage, which is really where you want your end game to lead as Rogue. You want to have dealt a bunch of damage in the early game, and then Alex Wicked Stab to close things out. So these next couple of turns are crucial for che0nsu.
Right. And he did not take the most proactive Golem. I think he really would have wanted the +2 option, or even draw 2 if it were available, but the options on the herbs were mostly reactive. Just going to play it down here to take a efficient trade on the Ringmaster Watley, even if it doesn't get max value. It does make the Troublemaker turn a lot more awkward for Alan, who of course plays the top-decked one. And oh my goodness! That's not good for Alan.
It's aggressive.
Terrible for Alan.
But yes, it's very, very bad for Alan. che0nsu can just quite happily clean up this Brain Freeze, this Troublemaker with the Brain Freeze, with the Prize Plunderer, with everything else.
My goodness.
He is just under no threat of dying whatsoever. And to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't be surprised if all 3 of these minions that can go face will go face, because with Alex Step in hand, double Wicked Stab still somewhere in deck, and obviously Secret Passage to find them, it's looking very, very good here for che0nsu.
Yeah, there's just no big punish for leaving the 3/3s on board. che0nsu is in no threat of dying. He is looking at Shadow Step here, which he can use che0nsu on the Golem, which then clears up the 3/3s. And even though it wrecks the Alex combo, he just doesn't need it at this point, right? As long as he has the board, then the Alex can clear out for lethal very, very likely after that. Even if there is Samuro for Alan, it's not doing much against this board.
Just such a clean game from che0nsu overall. I think he, while he obviously did get himself a very, very good starting hand, pretty close to the best possible hand with Octobots, the Kazakus and the Jandis, I think he piloted everything almost perfectly as well, and leads to Alan having to throw things down. A big first win for che0nsu. Obviously, again, as I shift my head back to Conquest instead of Last Hero Standing, doesn't mean that the Rogue can play again, but just getting a win in an unfavorable matchup at the start is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Blisteringly fast start for che0nsu, and that does mean that Alan's Rush Warrior has lost a potential target for it to beat now. It feels like the matchup spread is a bit more shaky because this was supposed to be the favorable for Alan. He has the mirror left potential. Sorry, che0nsu's not running Warrior, my mistake. There's the Libram Paladin that it could possibly queue into.
Yeah, again, trying to work our way back into Conquest queue order, if you want to call it that.
Sorry, he does have Warrior, my bad. It's the Mage that's not there.
Yes, indeed. But still, I think for che0nsu, looking like he's got himself some decent matchups left over. I don't think that he can hard target any of the remaining decks. Even the Rogue from Alan, which I would argue is does have a tough couple of matchups. The Paladin is not great, and obviously, despite what we just saw, I would say in general, Warrior is a good matchup against the Rogue as well. So that could be the weak spot for Alan. But even then, Rogue can do truly anything. So while che0nsu in the lead, apologies, I don't want to call anything over quite yet. So taking a look at our next match, it is going to be the Paladin from che0nsu, this secret Libram Paladin that has got a pretty interesting build here, actually. Obviously with the double Sword of the Fallen in the start, in addition to the secret curve, but double Libram of Judgment in the late game, in addition to Libram of Justice as well, which also gives you a weapon. There's a lot of weapon charges that need to be got through in this deck, but against Mage, I would argue that's pretty good. Having extra burn damage in the form of 15 damage weapons is a big deal.
Absolutely. The top end, while it looks clunky against Mage in particular, which Alan is running, it's not just burn damage to close out the game, it is also healing potentially if you can get the Libram corrupted. And that is really, really powerful because while you do have the healing from the Libram of Hope, sometimes it doesn't feel enough against Mage. If you spend your entire turn oftentimes playing the Libram of Hope, yes, you get the healing, but Mage can devolve that minion and then just keep chucking more burn at your face and you feel like you're back to square one. So having that weapon that can both clear and heal you could be a very big deal. Overall, I still feel like Spell Mage has a leg up in the matchup though, because they're very easily able to deal with Librams of Wisdom, which Paladin tries to get so much value off of using Devolving Missiles.
Very, very true. And I would also argue that Deck of Lunacy is a premium in this matchup where removal is hard to come by as the Libram Paladin. Again, we know that they have the Libram of Justice instead of Libram of Judgment to be able to clear off any of these minions, or at the very least reduce their cost. But without Consecration, Wild Pyro, all of these classic control tools that Paladin has historically leaned on, it's much more of a tempo deck, an aggressive deck that has, of course, robust late game as well, than it is a control deck. So if Mage does get the Deck of Lunacy and manages to hit, Glowfly, Force of Nature, any of these minion generating spells, then it could be a little bit rough for che0nsu.
We do have first day of school in the opener for che0nsu alongside the Night of Anointment, which he actually tosses away because it's kind of redundant with the first day. Aldor Attendant in the opening hand means that will be played turn one though, for sure. Already looks so great for che0nsu, but we do see this Lunacy in the opener for Alan.
That's looking pretty spicy to me. I'm also seeing AI and a refreshing Spring Water and even just a Pexis Blast as a pretty decent follow-up to try and clear off any minions on the other side. Looking like a very respectable hand for Alan, but che0nsu has got himself a pretty good hand in his own right. The double secret, of course, does hurt, but premium one-drops across the board.
Yeah, Bladed Cultist is Combi Chow is what Frodan called it, I believe. And Righteous Protector is just a card that was run in old aggro Paladin because it's of its synergy with Conviction. But if anything, it's still decent here, even if you can't quite buff its attack so far. It's a minion with Divine Shield, and so placing it well can make Combustion a bit more difficult to use for Alan, potentially. In this case, I'm not actually sure where the best position was, but my inclination is to say Divine Shield in the middle tends to make Combustion worse.
That's true. You can ping it, but that's obviously quite a bit of mana away. But I think I'm okay with this line. che0nsu, interestingly enough, not going for the Oh My Yog there, which I think was correct the vast majority of the time. But it does, of course, mean that coin can be used to get out exactly the Deck of Lunacy, which you would rather have delayed for a turn if possible.
che0nsu has had the best and worst opening hand in that all the secrets were manually played, but he does have quite a lot of pressure leading into Aldor Truthseeker. Of course, with all three secrets, Alan knows exactly what these are, the Oh My Yog Reckoning and Galloping Savior. So just testing first with the Brain Freeze so he can get that card draw online. And the Throw Glaive is not bad. Oh my god, Rancor! Chaos, no! Oh my goodness. This Lunacy is illegal. And Alan has seen the oh my yog. This board is getting blown up and Alan is getting tons of armor.
Just completely disgusting. And even skull off the top.
Stop,
oh
Alan,
my
stop.
lord.
Johnson's reaction.
Tidal wave! Another rancor! Oh, pff. I'm done.
Can't.
I'm done. First series of the day, and I am done.
Alan isn't done though. It just never stops. AoE 4 days. A Pexus Blast for the swing. che0nsu is done.
Yeah. There wasn't any way you could have not procced the Savior or done it last. Yeah, I think it's probably still correct. The average 5-drop is going to easily contest a 3-4. And getting Zai is a little bit less than incredible, as the name might suggest. But either way, it's still just Alan so far in the driving seat now.
He just doesn't care because he's back up to 30, undid che0nsu's work entirely, and he can go beyond 30 because of the double rancors. He has second Apexus Blast. He has refreshing Spring Water. This game is over, but I would like to see just how it ends because we haven't even seen the full extent of Alan's Lunacies.
This is but a hint of his true power. Force of Nature plus Pride's Fury seems pretty good. I mean, you could even fit in Libram of Justice plus Rancor first, right? Like, you have so much mana to work with how cheap all these cards are.
It's an embarrassment of riches. Alan just gonna go for the slightly clunkier cards here, which honestly it feels like he can afford to use just the 2-mana Chaos Nova or Libram of Justice, but as long as he clears the board before he develops, I'm a big fan because he can force che0nsu to try and deal with his own minions, and if he just develops, then he can use the Libram of Justice and continue pushing damage, or get the Force of Nature on board completely unchallenged. You do see che0nsu with this Samuro draw now, which he looks like is just going to take the hand of Adal on so he can get the clear on the Gurubashi, but that means then that Alan's Force of Nature is looking very safe.
Okay, to be fair, Libram of Hope is well up there in terms of the best cards he could top deck. So if ever he was going to have a hope, that is how it would get, how it would arrive.
It's just one of those Lunacy games where the deck looks completely unbeatable. It's nowhere in between. It's either completely nuts or it falls flat on its face and you die by turn 5.
I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to say that if the 10-mana card, be it obviously the Grand Slam or Survival of the Fittest, both would be insane. If that is anywhere near the bottom of the deck, then maybe there's just a whole bunch of whiffs that che0nsu can't get through. Like, it's potential that you could stack cards in a way that che0nsu can come out in the lead here, for sure.
Yeah, there are very niche situations, but look at this overgrowth now. Like, Alan can just work with full mana next turn. He can start getting down the masks and then the fireball. So even if che0nsu does have his deck stacked in the absolute best possible order, he won't have the time.
Okay, again, a decent draw.
Okay, Talon pulls Liadrin at this point, although you'd much rather have the 8/8 here. Just protects and challenges these 3/5s, but Alan's Libram of Judgment has Justice has something to say about it.
Oh, just look at this. Justice into Skull. That is not a legal combo. And then another Pride's Fury if you even needed that as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's so gross. I can't look.
Yeah, he of course knows exactly what the secret is, but you just proc it with one of them, doesn't matter which. And then you push a whole bunch of damage.
Just sitting on another 16 burst with Mask and Fireball in hand, barring minions played from che0nsu. But if he does play minions, like, Alan just has double Chaos Nova, Rancor to deal with it, not even counting the board he already has. And che0nsu has, what, just one more Oh My Yogg left from the sequel? Yikes.
Just get absolutely wrecked. That is an instance of, we've seen two very different games in the past couple of weeks of Alan on specifically Deck of Lunacy being played, right? There was one against Bank Yugi where he played it and then proceeded to do nothing for the entire game. Like, he didn't even play a card if he could avoid it because he was trying to, like, copy Rattlegore or some nonsense, relying on a misplay from his opponent. And then there's this, the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where you just nuke your opponent from orbit. There is absolutely nothing that they can do. And che0nsu knew it as soon as the skull came down, that it was essentially a wipe at that point. Equalizing the series, 1 game apiece. The Mage getting a win is a big deal, of course, but as you predicted at the start, still a decent matchup overall for the Mage against the Libram Paladin. And I am still relying on che0nsu. If he has any soft targets in the lineup, it's going to be on that rogue that he tries to get the win against.
I know you said some very insightful things, Derek, but I was just enjoying the replay of che0nsu flailing his arms around like an adorable fish or something flopping around. It was great, but obviously for che0nsu, the upside of this being Conquest and not LHS is that there's no chance for the Mage to make a repeat performance 2 more times with some Lunacy nonsense, right? That deck has won, and so Alan cannot queue it up once again. And che0nsu will be well aware now of the type of outs his opponent can have. There's much more consistent things you can play around, and he is going to switch onto his Rush Warrior into a potential rogue queue from Alan.
Right, which again is pretty good in terms of what you are looking at in terms of the matchups. Double Ogremancer plus Neophyte in this build of Warrior as well, which is kind of interesting. Again, in terms of the matchups that you're going to have against the field. I do still kind of prefer the idea of going for the slightly more standard build, but you have to bear in mind that this is very much the tournament meta they are playing here rather than the ladder meta. And so I do think for che0nsu, it's a perfectly reasonable way to go for the Warrior here, as it is going to be the mirror, where both of the players are going to be pretty sad, I would argue overall, that they are going for the Ogremancer Cult Neophyte package as opposed to the more standard Rush Warrior build that has a lot more impactful minions in the early game, like with the Tent Trasher that we keep talking about, that have become very, very standard in a lot of Rush Warrior decks.
Yeah, I do think that che0nsu would have preferred to queue this warrior into Alan's Rush Warrior than the Libram Paladin, though, trying to take the 50-50, because I do think Libram Paladin would struggle against the size of minions from Rush Warrior. The mirror is very intricate, and a lot of it relies on who gets the best conditionings. I say best in terms of not just who plays it first, but the most impactful in that it leads to value trades, right? Sometimes you conditioning, but you're only buffing a handful of minions, as opposed to somebody who's buffing everything drawn from Watley, or even just tokens from Bumper Car, and that can make all the difference.
Well, here we go. Getting things started. Gnarg on either side is a pretty good start for both players. Obviously makes development of any kind in the early game very, very difficult. Bumper Cars, Crab Riders, Parade Leaders, pretty much everything, even if it requires a little bit of help, is dying to the War Axe at the start. And so Alan going with, I guess, the alternate play, the minion that does technically survive on board for a turn in ETC. It's a way to spend your mana. It may get you ahead on board as well, so I'm definitely not opposed to it.
Yeah, it's very difficult to maneuver this matchup into a situation where ETC does get you lethal, because you're often using the tokens that you often pair with ETC for the combo to trade down the board, and you don't have the time to wait all that often. che0nsu does get the Cult Neophyte off the top, which is actually pretty sick against Alan here, because he's on the coin with the Athletic Studies, and it corrupts che0nsu's Stage Dive, which gets a premium outcome in the Rakara. We do see che0nsu already has Samuro in hand, which is another key card in the matchup, but he'll be waiting for a conditioning to really get it to pop off.
I mean, Alan here is just taking it pretty simple. Any hand buff mechanics that might or might not be available over the course of the game are not at the front and center of his game plan. It's very much just spend your mana, play out minions. At the end of the day, this is still a relatively simple Hearthstone deck. It does rely on winning board through tempo, but often just playing out your minions on curve is not the best way to achieve that.
Oh, this Rakara is insane. I think that the tension has broken now in favor of che0nsu, and he can pick up another Rakara. Although, does it fit better with the curve? I think it's still Rakara.
I think so too. I was looking at any way that you can corrupt the Pearl Tusk, because that's often a very, very key play. But obviously the fact that Runthak also is reduced in cost means that you can't quite get that to work. So I agree. Rakara does just look like the strongest option. But che0nsu disagreeing, does like the look of the Pearl Tusk. Again, it's a slightly better statted minion, I guess you could argue, but for the mana cost, it's still very expensive.
Yeah, in terms of spending his mana for the next turn, like the Pearl Tusk does it better than Rakara, but I was expecting che0nsu to go for Runthak anyway, so by that point I'd rather have the Rakara in hand. Importantly though, the Neophyte that che0nsu played a couple turns ago meant that the stage dive at the time for Alan cost 2, and so he didn't corrupt it when he played Parade Leader, which is a very big deal here. Alan really needs card draw, and he would rather much get the buff. Fishy Flyer is so clutch though, because he gets to clear off the Rakara and corrupt the stage dive now.
Yeah, huge deal. It means his hand is still pretty slow, really does need Runthak or the conditioning, of course, to buff up this Blademaster Samuro, because for both players, they have that ultimate comeback tool, which is, of course, a buffed up Samuro to swing most boards in their favor. They just need the buffs to go alongside it. che0nsu kind of has it with Runthak, but the fact that he can't even attack here would mean obviously that he knows it's available to be killed on the other side next turn. With Spectral Flyer plus the War Axe, he's basically just sending it out to die were he to play it.
Yeah, this is such an awkward situation for che0nsu because he really wants that buff for the Samuro, but at the same time, floating 5 mana against Warrior just does not feel good. If he goes for the tempo Pearl Tusk, it's dead to the Spectral without even the weapon swinging in, which is even worse. So I wouldn't hate it if che0nsu just goes for the Runthak and says that at least I need to eat up resources and put some damage into Alan's face for this to get killed. He completely disagrees though. It's going to be the full pass and greed from che0nsu, which to be fair, the Runthak has 2 very good buff targets in Samuro and the bumper card. But I fear for this line because it is quite greedy.
It's just weird as well because Alan hasn't really done anything for the last few turns. Like, he discovered a card. He hasn't played any powerful cards from his hand, so you can't really have a good read that he's going to develop here. And if his hand is just like double Troublemaker, for example, in the late game, Samuro's not very good against that. The attack, or the health rather, is just too high a lot of the time on the Troublemaker to get a good clear. So it's a tough play for che0nsu, but I do agree that I think it's probably correct. The only thing I would consider is playing the bumper card just to get the 1/1s in hand, which are a little bit more impactful than the 1/3 itself. But because it eats up the discount on the rush, I can understand just fully waiting another turn.
As it happens for che0nsu, if Alan doesn't develop anything big here, then the Runthak is better, right? Because it just rushes into the 2/2 instead. And it does happen that Alan did not have anything proactive to do here. There is that ability to coin Runthak, but Alan is also really valuing the ability for this to rush and buff his own Samuro because that is such a key card in the matchup to swing back boards. Again, only buffing it to 2 attack though, I'm not really sure of the average impact of that. We'll see how it pans out though, because che0nsu is going to be the first one to get the hand buffs. Everything up +1/+1 now.
Oh man, this is getting so interesting. Like, the fact that they both have Runthak into Samuro on either side, like they can both swing back board so heavily. Even the Troublemaker now to match the hands again. Obviously this big Runthak is a big deal to make this a little bit more amenable for Alan. But honestly, I still could not predict who's going to be in the lead this game. It's looking razor thin.
I'm feeling like Alan has the advantage here because he's held on to the coin this entire time, which means his Troublemaker can come down first. It's also been buffed a bit by the Samuro. And che0nsu's Samuro is only at +1/+1, so like the 2 attack is not enough to sweep up the Troublemaker.
Is the Troublemaker even good enough here though? Like, it's a good play obviously, especially given that it's buffed. But the targets are a little awkward. You're not getting many clean trades with the 3/3s.
With this hit of the weapon, he does make it the best possible chance that he takes value trades. So 1 good hit, 1 bad hit for Alan there. Does mean though that for Samuro to put damage on the Troublemaker, significant damage, like it's just he can't take the value trade because the Troublemaker's up +1/+1. So in terms of how relevant the Runthaks were, I think Alan had the advantage here. For che0nsu, he can just respond with his own Troublemaker if he likes though.
Yeah, the reason why I like that is obviously it corrupts the Pearl Tusk, and it's just Troublemaker on curve. But the second Troublemaker often feels a lot worse. If Alan was to just play a second one, find a way to clear off the Troublemaker on che0nsu's side, you kind of just pack it in right there.
But if he doesn't clear it this turn, it feels like he's just losing too hard as well, because it's just another 7 damage going face. Of course, the Troublemaker is going to regenerate tokens for Alan, so I'm not seeing the out for che0nsu here. It feels like my instinct would be on the Troublemaker just as well. Maybe force Alan to take some trades, but it looks like che0nsu has spotted a clear?
Yeah, I mean, he always had the clear on this turn. It's just like the amount of damage he has to take and how little he develops as well is the problem.
Yeah. Somewhat amended by him putting down ETC on this turn, so while it is a little bit of minion pressure only, he does get to push face damage, so he is turning this into a race with the Troublemaker in hand as well. Looking at it again, I like the line a lot, but oh my gosh, this conditioning is nuts for Alan.
Yeah, that's pretty backbreaking. The Samuro to swing, the Crab Rider without Wind Fury effectively here is still just fine as a 4-7 on this board to threaten lethal. Next turn with Alex870806, a miracle needed for che0nsu, and Troublemaker is not going to be that miracle.
Here for a good time.
Yep. I honestly wonder if Alan even had to play the Samuro there though, because he could have just played Crab Rider to take 2 trades and then the Sword Eater and redevelop the weapon, but Alan was just going for max pressure there, and it definitely works out with the Alex in hand. He knew that che0nsu had no outs, and yeah, first Troublemaker was absolutely huge there, and the buff of it going to 7 attack meant that the buffed Samuro from che0nsu was not able to take a VT, and so the clear had to involve che0nsu face tanking it, and that made all the difference.
That's right, made all the difference in the world. The one deck left remaining for Alan is that Rogue that needs to take a win against either the Paladin or the Warrior. I will say again that I think that che0nsu, despite having lost 2 games in a row now, is not out of this quite yet. I think his Warrior, if we see a Samuro that's anywhere near as powerful as it was in this matchup as it is against the Rogue, or if it comes down anywhere near that powerful when we see it against the Rogue, it could be a good win for che0nsu. Samuro, again, is very, very crucial in that matchup to give you a way to clear off those wide boards once they go for the big field contact turn. And that is the matchup that we're going to be seeing first. Rogue, Warrior against Rogue, and then should che0nsu win, Paladin against Rogue as well. And it's a huge deal, these next 2 games for che0nsu. If he wins, again, as we've been saying, pretty much secures himself out of potential for relegation. Should he take the loss, though, things start to look a little sketchy. He's definitely going to be praying that Lambie, High3, and Tom do not get the wins.
Yeah, it's really tough how predatory it tends to become at the end in APAC and in any region when it gets to relegation, because a lot of these players are friends and practice partners, but when it comes right down to it, if it's him or me, then you just need to get as many wins as you can possibly take and put the thought that you might be relegating one of your comrades out of your mind. Alan on the Miracle Rogue did play this matchup from the other side at the beginning of the series and lost it, so it's going to be a huge deal if he can also take that upset and 3-1 the series.
Big upset. It would be indeed. And the Miracle Rogue that he has got himself hit pretty standard for the most part. Just got himself a Penflinger instead of an Org Merchant, which is pretty standard. You know, we see players going for Penflinger instead of an Org Merchant, sometimes Broom instead of an Org Merchant. Although still in my heart, I am still a fan of the classic 30 list of double Org Merchant, the Foxy Frauds, the Vanessa in there as well, the standard good stuff. But no matter what, you are still relying on doing the same things in the matchup. Obviously, as we saw when che0nsu beat Alan in this exact matchup earlier on in the series, hitting the heavy hitters is a very, very big deal. Jandis, the Kazaka's obviously a big deal as well. Mancrit can help a lot. But honestly, there's a lot of merit in the plan where you just go super wide at the start of the game. If you can get Octobot and just tempo out Foxy Frauds, Cult Neophytes, even the Prize Plunderers and the Org Merchants, it's pretty powerful.
It is, and that is yet another situation where Samuro becomes paramount to the Warrior to be able to sweep up, and it's because Rogue has so many different ways to attack and approach the matchup that it feels like as the more skilled Rogue players have gotten more practice, that it's not quite as disastrous as it initially seemed. I do still think Warrior has the advantage though, and che0nsu has a very interesting mulligan choice here, because Sword Eater is a very good card just to coin out against Rogue. Getting the weapon immediately can kill things like Foxy Fraud. You'd obviously rather draw it off of Watley here and there, and it's also not a rush card that you can corrupt, but I think it's fine for che0nsu to keep it on the coin.
Yeah, really like the plan he's gone for here of just keeping the two good cards, like Athletic Studies and Stage Dive are just good. And to be honest, so is Sword Eater. Like, it's just one of the highest win rate cards in the starting hand in most matchups, and as you correctly put, especially against Rogue. Alan, though, on the other side, is just a single card away from having a very good time. Field Contact would obviously make this hand absolutely bananas, but even without that, this is a very good starting hand for when you're on the play.
It is, but che0nsu discovered Fishy Flyer, and he can coin it out next turn if it's just Octobot here from Alan, which I would be very tempted to do. There is not that much options for a Warrior to actually take that down in one fell swoop if they didn't start with Gunarg to like tempo out a Tent Trasher, for example. But Alan is going for the safer play, holding onto the Octobot, and will probably be heavily rewarded for that because he can discount it himself if he likes.
Big time. Big time. I mean, I was tempoing that out without thinking every day of the week if I was just playing this on ladder. But when you start to break it down, there's two very scary options. It's Fishy Flyer and the Outrider as well, which would have been able to swiftly deal. What am I saying? Even the Prime of blanking on the name of it as well. Yeah. Kargath, apologies, the wrong K. I was thinking Mankrik or Kazakus. But yes, sorry, indeed, Kargath would be a very clean way to deal with it. So there's many options there that che0nsu could have picked to deal with the efficient Octobot very cleanly.
Even a coin playmaker was not the easiest thing for Alan to deal with. So that was very heads up from Alan. And he does get the Mankrik down now. It's still not the easiest thing in the world to discount the Octobot because Prize Plunder is so premium to use on opposing minions. But he can just kind of backseat that game plan and just stick with the curve right now because he has Kazakus into 5-cost Golem. And then perhaps in 2 turns' time, he will have drawn a better way to proc the Octobot.
Yeah, 100%. He was, I think, looking at going Octobot plus Prize Plunder possibly in the last couple of turns, but now that there's some big minions coming down from che0nsu, I think that correctly Prize Plunder will be saved to be played on 2 opposing minions. Obviously unsure what the options were picked there, but deal 3 to 2 enemy minions looked pretty premium with the way the board state is likely to shake down.
Yeah, I think taking the plus buff on the minions is a bit greedy because you are expecting che0nsu to clear here. I'm just curious which keyword Alan picked because sometimes the deal 3 and the rush becomes redundant, but I would have been tempted to take rush on the first pick. If it was Divine Shield and deal 3 though, I think that would be ideal for Alan.
Well, I mean, look at this though. Rush in deal 3 looks huge here. Clears the board completely, gets him miles in the lead. Field Contact found as well. This is looking spicy.
Oh yeah, even shadow stepping this Golem, which is face-up information for che0nsu. But it's really hard for Warrior to play around it. They can't just not play minions for a very long time. But the Warmal Challenger is a very interesting pickup. He could have gone for a conditioning and just played that down and says that this is not a great minion to play 3 into, but I completely agree. Watley also doesn't shape up that nicely for the Golem to rush into because che0nsu can take it down with the bumper car after it goes to 1 HP, and he can get a bigger conditioning.
So again, there's obviously still the option on this turn to go for a self-proc on the Octobot. You can even play down Field Contact first if you wanted to, right? And then go for Prize Plunder afterwards. You could then get 3 draws when you count the double 0 mana 1 Thief as well.
Yeah, it would mean you're not able to play the Golem at that point, so it's really tough crossroads for Alan here. I think the Golem is a little bit too low impact, and instead Alan is going for this order to give him that 1 mana flexibility if he picks up the other Prize Plunderer or Og Merchant or Penflinger. There's a lot of ways to use that last mana. Brain Freeze would be ideal as well. Oh, double Flame Strike! Hello?
Ooh. Shadow Step as well at the end there, I think does just perfectly kill the Samuro. Obviously would need to consider about whether he wants to save it to go with the Golem again, but I think it's just too clean here. It allows you to keep the board thoroughly in your favor, and with the Og Merchant off the top as well, this could not have gone better for Alan, effectively demanding a Samuro on the other side for there to be any chance of clearing this board.
That was the perfect turn from Alan, and we can already see che0nsu fishing for the Samurai with the stage dive. Having played Watley first, there's a good chance he can get it, but I think that's a Crab Rider. Not the worst though, still helps with the cleanup duty that he'll have to be doing this turn. There is Playmaker that can go with it, or just get very greedy with conditioning and wait for an even bigger clear. Warmaul to take down the field contact is really only the most threatening minion here, especially since he knows what the golem does, right? It's not +2/+2. And so he's okay for now leaving up this wide board.
So while I'm obviously looking at just starting with Secret Passage, I guess there's some merit thinking about Golem on this turn. Like, you could play it, replay it with che0nsu, some nonsense like that. But that feels like a much more powerful combo to save when they do have a wide board. So let's just dig for some value options here. Does not find it. That's about as bad of a passage turn as I think you could get, because even though it does technically give him a way to clear the board, he really just wanted any card draw, any minion generation. Jandis would be insane. Just playing the Mancrick, Mancrick in Rage would be a big deal as well.
Yeah, Alan is in this weird situation where he knows that any big minion developed from him is going to get value traded by che0nsu. It's a full hand conditioning. There's guaranteed bumper card in hand because of the Watley played.
True.
And so he is just trying to ride off the back of these little puny minions and say that if che0nsu gets greedy, develops, and doesn't fully trade everything, then Alan let her rip on the Flame Strike and then gets that chip damage coming through every single turn. But with Playmaker, most of this board is going to be cleared up. And even if Alan does have Flame Strike to deal with it, that's pretty much his entire turn.
It is. I think that Alan will probably prioritize the Golem and then replay the Golem with che0nsu game plan, because that is still a very, very strong reactive game plan that also has a bit of proactivity woven in there with the 5/5 that you will end up with.
Yeah, definitely like that. It turns out we might just see back and forth clears in that sense. che0nsu is going for the full clear here with all of the rush minions generated and perhaps a weapon into One Thief if he feels that's necessary. And then Alan can go for that golden game plan, like you said. But then che0nsu still has second Playmaker, so he can clear the golem once again. It's a bit more expensive. And then Alan will maybe have to respond with Flame Strikes by then. And it's just going to be this very back and forth exchange that I'm not sure who will come out ahead on, because Alan has time to draw into his own Alex, into Wicked Stabs, and kind of accrue that burn damage that, okay, one has entered the hand.
Yeah, che0nsu, I think clearly as well, as you did correctly just start to talk about burn damage, clearly shows how afraid he is of it by trading in his Crab Rider there, even though it's just a 5/1 and could of course be killed by the dagger. Didn't want to tank 2 damage by swinging in with the weapon, so prioritizing his health very, very highly, which I think is smart. He has plenty of minion development and rush capabilities as well to clear the board, so just making sure he doesn't die to burst is a big deal. Now for Alan, the Flame Strike obviously is okay here, but I think he's just first of all thinking, how can I make this a guaranteed clear with the Golem outcomes, which this does.
Honestly, it was a bit risky, because if one of the shoot 3s goes onto the bumper card, then you that's the target he wanted to rush into with the golem. I think he still could have done it because he has Prize Plunder, like the guaranteed clear, but this one is obviously ideal, right? He doesn't have to spend the Plunder and he keeps the Flame Strikes in hand. I was honestly just looking at Flame Strike with Penflinger in the other order that turn for the full clear, but maybe a little bit too passive, because che0nsu could then just go Troublemaker. So Alan going for the riskier play, going to deny the Troublemaker for at least one more turn.
And obviously plenty of ways to wipe this board up, especially if you factor in the Fishy Flyer as well. More ways to clear the board, fill your hand up with more rush minions as well. It's going to be difficult for Alan to take this one down, because again, even though he's got the Flame Strike, these reactive options are not what you want. He wanted card draw into the burn damage. 18 damage is very achievable for Rogue in the next few turns. He just needed to hit that burn.
And the Flame Strike looks like it will be necessary if che0nsu just takes all of these trades here. I don't think he should swing into the Foxy Fraud. He should know now that he has more than enough resources to win on board. And so just preserving his health wherever he can is paramount here. And for Alan, it's such an expensive clear, but he has to take it. He just cannot afford to take 13 He can fit in some dagger swings, but you're absolutely right. He needs second Wicked Stab. He needs Alex to actually threaten counter lethal, because after second Flame Strike is used, he's kind of out of gas.
That's right, and che0nsu is not going to give him any breathing room whatsoever. This Troublemaker, obviously left up for a single, well, the turn it comes down even, is very scary, but if you leave it alive even for a single turn, almost always just spells your doom.
Oh, and this cannot be played with Flame Strike. I do think this has to be a clear turn and pray that there isn't second Troublemaker. So he's going to go for Pen Flinger, Flame Strike, and then Flinger again with Prize Plunder is a clear.
Looks that way.
Or just Prize Plunder at this point. But honestly, it feels like getting the tempo Pen Flinger is fine on board at this point. Instead, with the mana, using the Foxy Fraud instead, which is just better. So Alan's last push onto the board before the Jandis, but it's so simple for che0nsu to clean this up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pick your poison as to how you want to go about this. Getting the Ogremancer down as well, I think, is probably smart. Again, any way that means if they do even get Secret Passage as they're slim out, it's going to be very difficult for them to even get through. Not attacking the minion, I think, is very smart as well. But with Olgra off the top, again, the burn plan is close for Alan, but it's just out of his grasp at the moment. Even if he goes Wicked Stab, Passage, Wicked Stab, it's still one off.
That's so brutal. I think che0nsu was razor sharp about how aware of the breakpoints he was. Not swinging into the minion was absolutely paramount here, and he develops the taunt knowing that Alan has used double Prize Plunder already, and he's seen double Brain Freeze, so it's really tough to get through this and push the minion damage phase. Alan just gonna pray the Jandis gives him taunt. Double Lapidary, you're normally happy to see that, but not quite in this case. Looks like he's gonna have to Wicked Stab the Sword Eater because he knows about the Alex in che0nsu's hand from the Runthak. He's not running Tent Trasher. He's just dead because of the Ogremancer and weapon.
Just dead. Yep, he knows 100% that this one is over, but he's still just going to play it out nonetheless. Hope, I don't know, maybe he forgot something, maybe che0nsu messes up. There's always the slim chance in matches that are this tight and this important. But we're going all the way now in our first series of the day, Gia, to a Game 5. Could not be any more tight, any more close than this. And while we've had the decidedly favourable matchup, in our opinion, of Rogue versus Warrior, it's now going to be, Warrior versus Rogue. It's going to be the Paladin against the Rogue now for the final deck for che0nsu. And, you know, we talk a lot about Paladin's chances against Rogue in general, but I think specifically the Libram Paladin that he's gone for fills a niche that a lot of the other Paladin decks don't, specifically against Rogue.
Yeah, I do think it has a pretty strong matchup there. Able to consistently put out taunts, and if you get the Libram discounts, just putting additional health, even 1 or 2 on minions there, is super relevant to stay out of certain breakpoints from Rogue. For example, the Eldar Truthseeker on 7 health, you can't just go for like double Brain Freeze on it, or like a Wicked Stab plus Prize Plunder. It just gets a little bit more awkward for Rogue to deal the clears. And if they leave up even 1 minion, it feels like too much damage to take, because the Paladin can heal back up and stay healthy out of the Wicked Stab ranges, but the Rogue cannot do anything of the sort. I feel that Rogue really needs to get that super powerful Octobot start to have an advantage in the matchup, because the average draw is just not cutting it against the Paladin's average draw, in my opinion.
Yeah, the other problem that we kind of don't really talk about in Paladin, one of the big differences between N'Zoth Paladin or Libram Paladin, obviously, is the Librams themselves. Libram of Hope can make a big deal in terms of getting your health out of the burn range, but it's Samuro. The fact that you run Samuro in this Libram Paladin, I find, is so crucial, again, in this matchup against Rogue. If they do go for that classic play that we see almost every game with this version of Miracle Rogue, where they reduce all their minions with Octobot, go super wide, it's just not good enough, because Samuro, if it's in hand, is able to clear everything up thanks to the Hand of Adal, or the Librams of Wisdom. So definitely a lot of tricks up the Paladin's sleeve, contrary to how you may anticipate this to go, given that on the other side it's Rogue. But still a close matchup nonetheless.
early Sword of the Fallen for che0nsu is one of the best win rate cards in the opener. He does pick up Galloping Savior, which he runs one of, and so the Sword of the Fallen is going to get either Oh My Yogg or Reckoning. Yogg twice as likely. Oh no! It's only going to get Oh My Yogg now.
That sucks. That really, really sucks. And it's why I've seen a lot of players, specifically in N'Zoth Paladin, I believe, go for slightly heavier secret packages, to make them have a little bit more consistency on Sword of the Fallen, because this can of course happen. This is about as bad as it could have gone for che0nsu, but still not what you want to see.
And for Alan, because it was a secret on one for che0nsu, he does actually have the option to test Oh My Yogg with Swindle here. If he says this is Oh My Yogg, because Alan doesn't have the coin, he can be thinking, I need to proc this at some point, right? So might as well spend my mana and get that done. But he is maybe calling che0nsu's bluff here on the chance that this is not Oh My Yogg, then he really would not want to use Swindle just like that. Now that there's two secrets in play, I think he's reasonably certain that one of them is Oh My Yogg, but with the Shadow Step, he now has a different way to test it, potentially.
Yeah, obviously che0nsu, in a way, actually doesn't want to spend this final mana on Reckoning, because it removes any doubt from Alan's mind. He would then know perfectly how to play around the secrets, or at the very least, he would have full information as to what they were.
The Reckoning's a little too good just to kill off the Mankrik immediately, so I don't mind che0nsu playing it out there. Alan now can go for Swindle to proc the Oh My Yogg, and then he could still combo the second Swindle, which is only 2 cards played, and so Galloping Savior does not go off.
Okay, I like that. Give +1 attack. I don't even know what that card is, to be perfectly honest, but it didn't do anything.
The Silver Hand recruits you summon this game, so if Alan can somehow generate Stand Against Darkness or something, it could get spicy, but I don't think he's running Swashbuckler or any of that nonsense, so...
Yeah, it doesn't look that way. Finally, for che0nsu, though, some minion development of his own. Aldor Attendant, Hand of Adal is huge. Pretty good 1-drops as well, actually, for what it's worth.
These are insane. The Battlefield has, of course, synergy with che0nsu having the Libram of Justice and Libram of Judgment in hand. It's also just threatening minion to leave on board, but wife... Great timing for Alan here because the Reckoning has already been popped, so it doesn't straight away die. But also the Rocket Og Merchant for che0nsu is a big card that could be used when he picks up Libram of Hope, potentially. Immediately rush it. That could have some big value here. We'll see a bit later, though, because Alan is in the driver's seat. Knows that this is Oh My Yogg and Galloping Savior.
Correct, yeah, which is... kind of why I was anticipating it might just be Wicked Stab and Neophyte on this turn, because I personally, I think with this hand would rather test with Wicked Stab than Shadow Step, because Shadow Step Prize Plunderer with a field contact turn next turn is very, very powerful. But he is instead testing with the Shadow Step, which means one more card played will also proc the Galloping Savior, which gets a little bit scary. Just leaves the exact same amount of power on the board.
It's really close, right? Because while you do want the Shadow Step for Prize Plunder, I think you can still get the full clear with Stab and Prize Plunder, or at least only a little bit of health after that. And it makes his hand very weak with field contact the turn after. But I think it's well worth it. And it is the full clear.
It is the full clear. Yeah, it's... again, it's that constant payoff, or that balance you have to strike with Rogue. Do you go for a stronger play now, a stronger play later? Do you set up, or do you take your payoff immediately? But che0nsu here can have his cake and eat it. He gets the Aldor Truthseeker down, buffs it up. Libram of Judgment is going to be huge in the next few turns. He has plenty of health to work with, even if it doesn't have lifesteal. And so he's going to be able to mop up everything that comes down.
Perhaps I underestimated how good of a field contact turn this is for Alan, because with the 1-cost spell picked up, he can get minimum 3 activations. At second Brain Freeze to immediately kill off the minion from che0nsu is huge. Right now, it's pretty expensive for che0nsu to kill off the field contact, but he does have ways that he can do this in a cute way. We could see Liberal Justice and Rocket Og Merchant to shoot the Olgra, and he can swing into the field contact.
That's pretty good. I'm not sure if that's necessarily better. I mean, you may as well just do that and you could still go for the Libram of Judgment at the end, or of course, just carry or roam, as has now been picked up. But the real question, I guess, is whether it's a Libram of Justice instead of Libram of Judgment on this turn, as also looks fairly strong.
Yeah, there's so many different ways he could approach it. Honestly, I was not a huge fan of Cariel unless he's also going to play Libram of Justice because it gets challenged by the man crit. So it looks like he is going to go for the full clear this way. It all fits because of the discounts, so maximum tempo for che0nsu. Resources running short, but he still has some pretty good top decks in there. Hand of Adal at any point. Northwatch becomes kind of bad from here on, but Librams of Hope in the deck, Talon, Lady Liadrin, very strong stuff. And the Conjurer could give him more resources.
Yeah, a lot of good draws for che0nsu, but for Alan, this is the time to strike. His opponent just played a reasonable turn. They didn't play the Libram of Hope, which would be like the scariest thing they could do on that turn. So maybe you can make a read that they have a fairly weak hand. At the very least, you know it's just one card in deck and a 1-drop. So it's time to find some value of his own. Get ahead on board before che0nsu can find those powerful options. And although it's not often a powerful card in Rogue, Deep Freeze looks pretty good here to me.
This is just a curve. Like, the freeze effect is very valuable against Paladin, but the thing is, I think Alan really wants to clear off the Cariel using Penflinger this turn. So if he takes one of the cheaper spells, he's able to do that with the Penflinger. It's really close.
That's a really tough choice.
And then go fishing with Secret Passage, but then with double Brain Freeze taken, I think he is just going for the guaranteed clear on the Cariel. Gets Wormweaver off of another Discover option from Fond of Power. So I think this is a fair trade-off, right? He gives away, he passes up the big value option, but still gets a way to generate board presence.
That's fair. That's fair. Octobot being found not at its strongest right here, I will say.
It actually doesn't, I mean, there's no way to
it's a one
straight up on board, but it's not discounting very much at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. You can turn it into a 2-5.
That's pretty good.
In terms of where the 3-2 would want to trade, if it does trade, it's potentially on the Octobot, so I don't mind buffing it whatsoever. On the recruit instead, trying to, I guess, get the repeated value off of that Libram of Hope, Wisdom, but the Janus is huge here for Alan. Oh! And Alar, yikes.
The card that is officially playable in Grandmasters lists, Alar. Absolutely disgusting here, as it's going to be pretty difficult for che0nsu to get through both the initial body, even if it is just a effectively 1 health minion, but then the egg as well does become pretty difficult.
And so Alan can isolate the minion with the Libram on it, but honestly, I'm so interested in just shipping all the minion damage face at this point. He has Wicked Stab Alex. It's so tempting, but then you're also potentially protecting the Alar if he takes all the trades here, so this is probably just more discipline from Alan. Going for halfway point, where he leaves McGurgle up. Killing that actually gives che0nsu an out to top deck McGurgle Prime, so maybe that's just better from Alan.
Oh, that top deck for che0nsu is a disaster, though. He needs 6 turns to get through all these Libram charges, which, realistically, is never going to happen. I think, even though you should absolutely consider the full-on face race game plan here, you very quickly realize that you just simply do not win it.
Oh, this brick was so painful for che0nsu. Like, he can get through Alar, which he now knows is the illusion, then put the Wisdom on the McGurgle and then kill off the Death Rattle, but he's just leaving so much damage on board here. You also really want to kill Jandis in case that gets stepped, but that means he's not swinging face with Libram of Judgment. It's all such a disaster. I think che0nsu's best game plan, though, is to try and survive into, like, a Samuro clear, and so dealing with minions is where my head's at here. The Libram of Judgment face race, I just don't think gets there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from our side it's worth counting up that he is very close to just straight up dead, as there is 10, 11, 1 damage off lethal, right? Just in hand available to Alan, with the Alexstrasza, of course.
Gonna spend some mana on the Libram here, which I was maybe thinking hit Jandis and then re-equip that, but obviously if he's trying to stay alive for longer, that just removes more damage. Alex is just lethal straight away. che0nsu was holding out for maybe a top deck of Libram of Hope for one more turn there, but Alan gave him no such breathing room. That's brutal for che0nsu because now he's once again looking in danger of relegation. Still has secured himself that 1 point for this weekend, so now he will just be a spectator as to what happens in the matches later today.
Yeah, his fate entirely out of his own hands now. And I know that you and I think I'll speak for the both of us when I say we really do want che0nsu to stay in Grandmasters, one of our favorite players to watch, and a delight to get to cast his matches. But Alan is no different, of course. We love Alan and we wish him the best. Of course, he's already guaranteed that spot in playoffs. The question now is really just if he does get up right to the top and Blitzchung and Alu870806 as the players above him don't do all too well. I guess Alu870806 is really the big one because Blitzchung is almost guaranteed first place. Can Alan squeak in second place and get himself